Hello and welcome to About Books. I'm Faye Clow. My guest today is C. Arthur Ellis, author of Zora Hurston and the Strange Case of Ruby McCollum. Welcome, Dr. Ellis.
Thank you so much.
This book was such a fascinating thing to me that I hardly know where to begin. But first of all, tell us about yourself and how you decided to write this book.
This story actually happened in my hometown of Live Oak, Florida in 1952, at least the murder did, when I was a child. And it caught my attention even at that time because obviously everyone in town was talking about it. Yet they weren't talking about it. It was a story, as you've read, that was shrouded in secrecy. So as a child, I could know very little about it and grew up, of course, even more intrigued. We lived very close to the McCollum family, that is, primary characters in the story, and also about a few houses down from the doctor who was the victim in the story. So you can imagine this would be something that would capture a child's attention. Then as I went on to college, I looked back and thought, gee, wouldn't it be interesting to learn from an adult's perspective what this story was all about? I went to the courthouse to look for the trial transcript, and it simply wasn't there. I was told that it had been microfilmed in Gainesville, Florida. So I tried to obtain a copy there, could not obtain a copy. It was in bits and pieces. And I pursued about a 3-year quest to obtain the trial transcript. In the meantime, I tried to talk with people in the small town of Live Oak, but no one would talk about the story, except my father, who had worked with Dr. Adams. So that explains basically my interest as a child, being intrigued, trying to find a transcript, and eventually finding the transcript in several parts in Tallahassee, putting it together and publishing it as a book, an annotated trial transcript book, for the general public. So that was my interest, but I had no idea what I would discover as far as the story, and that's what intrigued you.
So the murder case is that Ruby McCollum, an African-American woman in Live Oak, shoots Dr. Adams.
And, of course, that was a big scandal at the time. Yeah. And the rumors were that she did not pay her doctor bill.
Yeah.
Which was very strange to everyone because Ruby McCollum happened to be married to Sam McCollum, who was one of the wealthiest men in Suwannee County, black or white. He was wealthy because he ran 2 operations that were illegal. One was liquor in a dry county, and the second was an operation called Bolita, which was a gambling game somewhat like Lotto today. So it was unlikely that Ruby McCollum shot the doctor over a doctor bill.
Yeah. And so the first 2 words of the title of this book are Zora Hurston. What does she have to do with this case?
Zora Hurston was a famous anthropologist of the 1930s. She was only discovered recently. One of her novels was Their Eyes Were Watching God.
Right.
A made-for-television movie was produced by Harpo Productions, that's Oprah. So Zora Hurston had heard about this case. She had been asked to cover it for a black newspaper, the Pittsburgh Courier. The story particularly intrigued her because she had done some work earlier as a cultural anthropologist in North Florida, in the same area that this story happened, and had discovered in the timber camps of North Florida a concept called paramour rights. That was the right of a white man to take a colored woman as his mistress and force her to have his children. She thought that she saw a parallel in the case of Ruby McCollum and therefore took on the assignment to cover the trial for the Pittsburgh Courier.
So as part of your research, were you able to read her articles from the Courier?
Yes. As a matter of fact, they are generally available on microfilm for anyone who wants to read them. But what was very, very discouraging to Zora Hurston was the same thing that I had found. No one in town, whether they were black or white, would discuss this case. They were either intimidated or fearful, and she could not really discover why. She had no idea why. So when you read her story, she's primarily reporting the trial. And she actually sat through the trial, so you see through her eyes what happened at the trial.
Now, this story happened in the early 1950s, correct?
1952.
Yeah, I was just amazed. I had never heard about it. I was so struck by the manipulation of truth in that community. But the first time was when Ruby's lawyer is disbarred for a little something that happened years and years previously.
Yes, and as we had a chance to mention prior to the broadcast, this is a multi-layered case. It's like a tapestry that just keeps having threads woven through it in many different directions. What you're referring to, I call subterranean affairs between the black and white communities at the time. Small southern communities had a public face and a private face. The public face was, here are the blacks, they're all nice and happy over here, or the coloreds as they were called then. And here are the whites, and they're nice and happy over here, and everybody gets along just fine. But, of course, that wasn't exactly the truth, and there were many different complex situations that went on between the two communities. One, of course, was this paramour rights issue, where many white men had a black mistress whom he forced to have his children. Dr. Adams wasn't the only one. The other thing was that there were quite a number of illegal activities going on in between these communities, and the black community would pay the white community police officers protection to cover up what they were doing to earn their living.
I thought it was very interesting that the McCollums were making so much money that the doctor horned in on their business and took a percentage of it.
Exactly.
You would think a doctor would be well able to support himself with his practice.
Well, of course, at that time, doctors in the South were working for turnip greens and chicken. This was prior to Medicare or Medicaid and prior to any insurance coverage. The Hill-Burton Act was established, actually, that created Suwannee County Hospital in this town of Live Oak, Florida, the first rural hospital to be funded by the federal government. So this brought some revenues into the county, and, of course, Dr. Adams was right there in the emergency room to get his share. And then Blue Cross Blue Shield was formed as a service organization. And Dr. Adams enrolled many phantom farm workers who weren't even there so that he could collect on that insurance. But it was a rather desperate act of a physician at that time to accumulate any wealth.
There's this one little bit where the doctor's nurse is saying that she has 42 insurance applications for one day, and he couldn't possibly see that many in one day.
Exactly.
So he said, just spread them out over time. So he just fabricated.
He did fabricate, as any good sociopath would. He actually admitted more people to the hospital than it had beds. So on paper, he had more admissions than there were beds in the hospital. You didn't have computers at that time, and you didn't have any great way of auditing. Blue Cross Blue Shield did catch up with him, as did the VA, but he managed to wiggle out of the charges. In fact, the VA brought a case against him in Tampa, Florida, and he brought practically everybody in town down to fill a hotel and witness for him, so the case was thrown out.
Nothing tarnished his reputation, it seems like.